All right, well, first of all, thanks for coming. As you know, the Rauner campaign is running using the argument that he's an outsider who can bring reform to the system, and that somehow he's going to run Illinois like a business. Well, we kind of know by now that he's kind of a money insider who's done pay to play about as well as many other moneyed insiders. When he talks about running Illinois like a business, so what type of business are we referring to? Are we talking about the way Rauner runs his own businesses? The Wall Street Journal has a phrase. They call them vulture capitalists. These are individuals who invest in companies that are making profits, and they sell and they squeeze the companies for profits, cutting services, not producing, not necessarily inventing a product, and sometimes cutting jobs, and sometimes exporting jobs. The objective here is profit, not jobs creation. And the Wall Street Journal has coined these type of investments vulture capitalism. I think they made that reference in reference to Rauner's purchasing of nursing homes and then squeezing them for profits and selling those nursing homes. Well, another convenient tool or another effective tool for profit maximization is the exporting of jobs overseas. In 2005, Rauner created a company, GTC Rauner created a company called HQ. It was headquartered in Dallas, and this company was really created for purposes of outsourcing. He then later that year purchased a company called Zenta, and then in 2007, those two companies, along with two other outsourcing companies, incorporated. They created a conglomerate, and the purpose of that conglomerate, referred to as Zenta, was outsourcing. Their business was outsourcing, and their business was showing other investors and other companies how to outsource. This was an outsourcing business. You can't be running for the governor of Illinois claiming that you're going to create jobs when you really haven't created any jobs. You've been very successful at creating profit by reducing jobs, by cutting services, and by exporting jobs. But to argue that you're going to be a job creator when you've been just the opposite, and when you've literally created a conglomerate that is in the business of exporting jobs, or showing companies and teaching companies how to export their jobs, I don't know. There's just something fundamentally wrong with that. We're putting out a fact sheet on two other Rauner companies that did some significant job exporting. There's the Polymer company, and this company is interesting because this company was actually run by Rauner. Let me point out that they outsourced jobs to India and Mexico, and then about the time that the company was going bankrupt, Rauner exited the company, and I think they stuck investors with like a $600 million in obligations. And then there's a second company that we cited, Prestige Brand Holdings, and we've got the background on these companies. In this case, they exported jobs. They exported jobs to Pakistan, Japan, Mexico, and Brazil. So, yes, I guess Rauner does want to run Illinois like a business. Well, his business practices have been profit-taking and not job creation, and not and in fact, in many cases, it's been about exporting jobs to take advantage of the lower wages. I want to take a quote. There was a quote that Rauner made in one of the magazines. I don't recall which one, but where he basically talked about that. He said that any job that is not dependent on physical location can in effect be outsourced. And I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'll give you a copy of the exact quote. But clearly, the Rauner approach at business management has been about profit maximization, not job creation, not job expansion, not job growth. Now, while these individuals have become masters in the pursuit of profit, they've also become masters in the pursuit of tax avoidance. And we've all seen the controversies regarding Rauner gaming the system in order to reduce his income tax liability. And we saw some recent stories about Rauner avoiding tax liability altogether for parts of his income by obviously stashing his money in the Cayman Islands. A while back, the Tribune asked him the question about the Cayman Island investments. His first response was he didn't think he had investments in the Cayman Islands. The Tribune then later reported that indeed he did have personal, he did have personal income exported to the Cayman Islands, and now we've discovered that he's been his investors have been stashing money in the Cayman Islands. I think there's 12 specific examples of investments being made, of those investors being made in the Cayman Islands. So while these individuals are masters at profit taking, they're also masters of tax avoidance. And look, you invest in the Cayman Islands for two reasons. One is to avoid tax liability, and two is to avoid disclosure, because the Cayman Islands, you want to hide your money, you invest it in the Cayman Islands. And isn't it a bit ironic that during the peak of the recession, in 2008, 2009, when the recession was at its worst, Ronner was engaging in the type of business practices that cut jobs, that cut services, and that exported jobs abroad, while finding ways to either reduce his tax liability and that of his investors, or avoid tax liability altogether in the case of certain amounts of his income with the Cayman Island investment. So it is a bit ironic that someone who is now running for governor on a platform that he wants to create jobs has been a profit taker, and has been a profit taker as well as a jobs taker. So these things are important to point out. Now, we can all get to the bottom of this by disclosure. Bruce Ronner says, trust me, I haven't broken any laws. Well, just because you don't break laws, that doesn't mean that what you're doing is right. But what's really important here is that we have full disclosure. We need to know the nature of investments. We need to know the limited partners. With respects to the jobs, the companies that he's invested and run in, we'd like to know what jobs were created, what jobs were cut, what jobs were exported to outsource to other countries. I mean, that basic requests. And then while he's at it, please release your tax schedules, so we can know, so we'll have a good idea of where your income came from, how you found ways to significantly reduce your tax liability, and whether or not you had any conflicts of interest. I say, trust is a two-way street. If you want the public to trust you, then you have an obligation to be open and transparent and honest with the public. And so far, it's just been tax avoidance. And I'll tell you why. Because he is convinced that he can buy enough media time. He can buy enough media time to overwhelm, any media that is raises questions about his investments, raises questions about his business practices, raises questions about his tax avoidance, and he's absolutely convinced that he can do that. So I think we're going to continue to see him kind of dodge and weave and avoid answering tough questions in hopes that he can coast to the election.
Well, I got a question.
Yes.
Kind of on the same vein. He's coming to Springfield today to talk about the whole issue of term limits and how it ought to be taken up by the Supreme Court, and they better go along.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Is that just kind of over the top?
Yeah, well, look,
Supreme Court, or what?
And there's a reason we're standing in front of the statue today. Besides, Honest Abe, we're standing in front of the statue because about 20 years ago, Governor Quinn came to Springfield with his 500,000 signatures on his petition drive to put term limits on the ballot. Term limits on the ballot. Of course, we all know what happened. The Supreme Court rejected it, and the Supreme Court actually in their decision said, if you're going to do term limits, you have to have a constitutional convention. That's what the Supreme Court said. Incidentally, where was Mr. Ronner 20 years ago? All right, granted, maybe he hadn't perfected his art of job exportation yet. So let's fast forward. It's 2008. Governor Quinn, and as you know, every is it 20 years you can push for a constitutional convention. Oh, sorry about that. Let's fast forward now. It's 2008. As you know, every 20 years the Constitution says you can push for a constitutional convention. You can call for a new constitutional convention if the voters vote for it. Governor Quinn is pushing to put a referendum on the ballot calling for a constitutional convention. I know because at the time I was rebuilding schools in New Orleans, he invited me to a series of events to advocate on behalf of the Constitutional Convention. And we said one of the benefits of the Constitutional Convention was you can address so many issues, including term limits. Where was Mr. Ronner? It's 2008 now. Where is he? I mean, was he taking up the cause? we were kind of lonely out there advocating for the Constitutional Convention, which could have included taking up the issue of term limits, and we didn't receive a lot of support from individuals of any party. So you should ask him 3 questions. Question number 1 is, where were you in 1994? Question number 2 is, where were you in 2008? We know you were making money then. We know you were generating huge profits from outsourcing and from job cutting, and certainly in the case of nursing homes, service, the cutting and the of services. We know that was happening. Where were you in 2008? You just woke up one day and said, well, I'm going to advocate for term limits. And then the 3rd question you should ask him is, why, in light of the Constitution of the Supreme Court's ruling in 1994 explaining why they rejected Governor Quinn's very simple term limit initiative, he didn't construct a referendum that was in a way that might stand the chance of surviving scrutiny. Instead, he just not only did term limits. You want to increase the size of one house and reduce the size of another house and throw a bunch of other stuff, like throw in the whole kitchen sink. We all know why he's doing the term limit thing. I mean, it's a campaign gimmick, because he was nowhere to be found when we had an opportunity to push for term limits twice.
Changing the legislative structure was clearly part of trying to be constitutional, wasn't it?
Well, I think if you're going to push a term limit issue, you push a simple term limit issue. But I think the Supreme Court, the bottom line is this: you wait until you're running for election to push for term limits when you have plenty of opportunities to support term limit initiatives in the past. So the question is best put to him. Governor Quinn has been here on the term limit issue twice. Mr. Rauner was nowhere to be found until he decided to run for election.
And so, Paul, on this Cayman Island stuff, the argument that the Rauner people are saying is that the state pension systems have benefited by investments going there, because otherwise they'd be penalized. I mean, do you think that that's legitimate? And then B, no. if it is legitimate, I mean, should the law be changed as it is? They can't invest in the Sudan, they can't invest in Iran. Should it be changed so the Cayman Islands? Well,
look, the bottom line is they never answer a question. They never explain why. It's always a deflection. The pension systems, which are independent and not under the control of the governor, and they make investments independent of the state, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective. To equate what he's doing to avoid taxation, so that he can maximize, so he can take his profits and not pay his fair share on those profits with what the pension funds or some of the pension funds might be doing in the Cayman Islands, is simply a deflection. He was caught red-handed saying that he didn't think he had investments when he did, and then not explaining that he not only had his own investments, or he had his own money stashed in Cayman Islands, but obviously that of his investors. So the bottom line is he needs to answer the question.
But the pension systems will tell you they don't care if their money's in the Cayman Islands, because they want to maximize profits. I
think it's two different. The pension systems they're trying to fund the pension systems so that taxpayers don't have to pay more. This guy is about stashing profits that he made. Taking over companies, shrinking services, laying off people, outsourcing jobs. There's a difference. He's taking his profits. And he's avoiding tax liability on his profits. All right, so he can continue to deflect, but at the end of the day, he needs to answer questions and at minimum disclose. It's like his answer on taxes. Oh, I pay my taxes. I haven't broken any law. Where are the schedules? Where are the tax schedules? You saw Romney's schedules. They were larger than the phone book for those of us who still have. So to be clear,
though, the state pension investments don't need any changes. There shouldn't be further exemptions.
That's a whole separate issue. The issue here is you're making investments. You're stashing money in the Cayman Islands. You're stashing money in the Cayman Islands. You're investing money to maximize your profits and to avoid paying taxes on the profits. I think they're two separate issues, and we've got to hold him to, just not, well, they're doing it. Well, they're not doing it. It's not the same. It's like comparing apples and oranges. And I'm not defending what the pension systems do, but the pension systems have a responsibility, obviously, to maximize pension returns.
Maximize profits?
Last question.
No.
Go ahead.
Maximize profits?
Reduce
tax liability? Everything you're saying sounds like the American way.
Yeah. Well, look, all I'm saying is Mr. Rauner is maximizing profits by reducing jobs, by outsourcing jobs, and then trying to avoid tax liability on those profits. So I think what we're asking for him to do is to give us a more thorough explanation, and more importantly, give us full disclosure. So we can look at his tax returns. We can look at his tax returns with the schedules, which will tell us where the income is coming from, where the conflicts of interest may lie, and so that we can get a list of his investors and limited partners, and we can see where the investments are going, because transparency is critically
Were
important.
any Illinois jobs outsourced? Were any jobs that were in Illinois gone now? Okay. And what about, do you not have any examples of that? Illinois jobs that have left under Rauner firm?
I don't have any examples right at hand. I mean, you might want to ask him to identify where he's made investments and to identify jobs that have been created, if you can find any, and jobs that have been lost. But whether you're exporting Illinois jobs or exporting jobs in other states, the bottom line is there's still American jobs. And look, you export jobs to do what? So you can pay lower wages and you can avoid paying benefits. You can maximize profits. That's the only reason to do that.
On unemployment.
Oh, well.
Back off.
All right, well, don't yell at him. I hope you're as aggressive with Mr. Rauner today.
Well, we're going to be if you.
Yeah, and the phalanx will pull. I know you guys try. I'm not in any
On
way.
unemployment, Rauner says Quinn is terrible to be heralding the fact that 63,000 jobs have been, people have dropped out of the workforce.
And boy,
in 7 months
look,
or so.
we'll be more than happy to give you the correct statistics and not cherry pick the years and the months that we do comparison. The bottom line is the unemployment rate was at 4%, now it's at 6.8%. In the last year, it's gone from 9.2% to 6.8%. Are we satisfied with that? Absolutely not. We need to continue to make progress. But I think last month the job creation was the strongest it's been in 30 years. Let me also point out that the jobs that are being created, a lot of these jobs are manufacturing jobs. So these are jobs that are going to be long lasting. They're not like seasonal service jobs and things like that. So the bottom line is the state's making progress. But if the state makes progress, Mr. Rauner doesn't benefit. I mean, so it's like the vulture capitalists, you can't make profit unless you cut jobs or outsource jobs. Well, in politics, you can't make headway if the state's not in turmoil, if the state's not struggling, if you can't make the case that if you can't make the case that things are getting worse when things are in fact getting better. We've come a long way. We have a long way to go, and I think that's why. I mean, there's not a week that goes by without the governor having another jobs announcement with another firm. So I think Illinois is coming back, but we have a long way to go.
I want to build on Bernie's.
Go ahead.
On the term limit issue, do you think he's out of line for coming here and threatening the Supreme Court to, go, approve this because here I am, Bruce.
Applying political pressure.
Look, it's great. Apply political pressure on the Supreme Court. Where were you? Where were you? I mean, this guy was reaping huge profits, making like $1 million a week, okay, while he was cutting jobs and outsourcing jobs during the height of the recession. Now you're now you've suddenly been born again on the jobs issue suddenly, and suddenly we're here and we're talking about term limits when you had 2 other opportunities to engage in a big way, both in '94. Okay, let's say you didn't start really making his money until the new millennium, 2008, and we're kind of alone out there on the issue of the Constitutional Convention. So the bottom line here is you've got to ask yourself, why did you just decide that term limits was going to be a good issue when you decided to run for governor?
We talk about job losses, but I would like to...
One more question and I have to go. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right.
Well, I don't know.
No. I've got to go. I've got like 4 stops I have to make. Honest to God.
Under Pat Quinn, though, I mean, there were job loss of state government. He closed a bunch of state facilities and it continues to want to do more. Isn't that a loss of Illinois jobs that are really hurting downstate towns?
Well, look, all I know is the governor faced a major financial crisis. He had to make some very tough decisions. He doesn't shy away from making tough decisions, and we've saved $5.7 billion in reduced state expenditures in the last 5 years because of the initiatives that Governor Quinn has undertook. But he had to take those initiatives so he could restore funding to the pension systems, which, remember, when they came in, they were making contributions to the pension systems, so that he could protect education funding and so that he could pay down the unpaid bills. And you know, when Governor Quinn came in, our unpaid bills were pushing $10 billion. Now they're $3.7 billion. That's a significant reduction. So the bottom line is, you know, Governor Quinn has not shied away from making tough decisions and not shied away from taking responsibility for those decisions. But we got a guy who wants to cut the general funds $8 billion, which means since education gets half the discretionary money in the general funds, which means education would probably take a hit of between 40 to 50%. So there's going to be no bigger jobs killer in terms of the impact that those cuts are going to have on schools, on the laying off of teachers, but just the impact that it's going to have by wrecking the educational system, making college and university education less accessible to individuals, particularly working families and the children of working families, and not to mention that what an underfunding of the education system will do to the economic climate. I got to go. Thanks, everybody.